Alrighty then, hello all you subjects of the internet out there. I am the Aromantic Shipper coming at you today with yet another video. Now I'm sure all of you are looking at the title of this video and wondering to yourself, what? Rewriting Avatar The Last Airbender? That series is a masterpiece, why would you even need to rewrite it in the first place? And it is true, Avatar The Last Airbender is an absolute masterpiece and almost perfect, certainly containing less flaws than the sequel series Legend of Korra. However, that almost is still there, and after rewatching the series probably about a dozen times over by now and memorizing every episode and every scene down to the smallest detail, I have compiled over time in my head a list of small gripes and missed opportunities regarding the show, and I'm going to be attempting to fix them in this video. In the future, I plan to come out with full rewrites of each season of The Legend of Korra, fixing many of the problems in that series, but for now, I thought I would just take one long single video explaining some of the alterations I would make to the greatness that is the original Avatar series in its entirety. And of course, this is just my opinion, and if you have different ideas for how you thought the Avatar series should have gone, please leave them in the comments below. Anyway, let's get to it. So then, let's start out with Season 1. Despite Season 1 being the lesser of the three seasons, I would actually probably make the least alterations to it, as I think it does an absolutely brilliant job introducing the audience to the world of this show. But there would still be some stuff changed, so let's get to the changes I would make episode by episode. In Episode 1, the first thing we would see is the series opening, water, earth, fire, and air, but the silhouettes that were there never made much sense to me. I mean, Aang makes sense, but Master Pakku, Azula, and randomly Roku's earthbending master. In my rewrite, it would just be the bending members of Team Avatar, Aang, Katara, Toph, and Zuko. There should be an extra scene of Aang getting back to the village, and we don't see what he is dreaming until the storm to keep up the mystery. Also, we have to talk about Zuko's ancestors for a minute. So in the series, Zuko's great-grandfather is supposed to be Sozin, but this makes no fucking sense. Sozin was old as shit 100 years ago when he wiped out the air nomads. By that point, he already should have had great-grandkids, and maybe even great-great-grandkids. In my rewrite, there are quite a few Fire Lords between Sozin and Zulan, including Fire Lord Aizen, Fire Lord Xiaolynx, and Fire Lord Zeno. So, Zuko had quite a few more ancestors than he lists in the original who tried to capture the Avatar. Katara should explain to Aang that all the waterbenders were taken away by the Fire Nation because they wanted to destroy the they wanted to destroy the Water Tribe culture. Aang should also be offered warmer clothes by Katara, but he tells her that airbenders are able to warm themselves with only their breathing, and that he already lived on a snowy mountain not far from the South Pole before, so he will be fine. Also, Aang should actually not find out he has been transported 100 years into the future in the pilot in my rewrite, though Katara is still suspecting that that's what happened, while Aang questions how long he was in the iceberg. Because for real, Aang got over the fact that everyone he knew and loved was dead in like 4 seconds in the original. Finally, in addition to setting off a flare, the room Aang and Katara are in is also set to explode, and Aang is able to save them by jumping out of the hole in the ceiling. In Episode 2, and one of the few additions to the Shyamalan adaptation I liked, Gran should mention how her friend Hama, the last waterbender of the Southern Tribe, was taken away from her. Also, Sokka tells Katara to stay back and not reveal that she can waterbend no matter what, so she isn't taken. And he also mentions how the Fire Nation will attack at day when they are strongest, while Katara tells him he is just being paranoid. Also, Zuko shouldn't shoot fire at Sokka to demonstrate how, even without his bending, Sokka can hardly do anything to him. When Aang goes to Zuko's room to get his staff back, Zuko should lock him in, and Aang should escape out the window, with Zuko then jumping after him. When Zuko shoots fire at Aang, pushing him off the edge of the ship, it should actually show Aang getting burned when he gets burned, and this is the case throughout the series, unlike in the original, where it pretty much only happens in episode 16, so Katara can show off her magical healing juice. Also, rather than Iroh and Zuko trying to shoot down Appa together, Zuko just tells Iroh to leave him dangling from the anchor, and we get a showcase of the incredibly powerful firebending Iroh's able to do on his own, using the dragon dance stances. In Episode 3, Zhao says that he won't allow Zuko to capture the Avatar unless he wins the Agni Kai, and the Agni Kai does not reuse animation frames like it does in the original episode. And also, of course, it is at the Air Temple that Aang finds out he's been in the iceberg for 100 years. Another one of the few changes in the Shyamalan adaptation that I actually think made a lot of sense, which explains why he's so enthusiastic and carefree about returning to the Air Temple at the beginning, and he slowly realizes just how badly things became throughout the episode. Also, Aang comes across a dragon skeleton, which explains how the firebenders were able to attack the airbenders high in the sky. And rather than Katara telling Aang, someone she just met a few days ago, that she is his family, she says that her and Sokka can be his family. In episode 4, there should probably be some extra lines here or there to explain some things that were just very odd in the original. It's really weird how all the Kyoshi warriors in the original series were teenagers. I mean, I'm assuming because their leader Suki was. So, in my version, Kyoshi Island isn't actually keeping out of the war, and all the more experienced warrior women are off fighting in the war, leaving the younger women behind to defend. Which Sokka and Suki bond over, considering he was left in a similar situation when the men of his tribe left. Also, Suki explains to Sokka that the Kyoshi warriors were created so that women could showcase how capable they are to promote gender equality around the world. Get woke, Sokka. Also, Suki should not get mad after Sokka pushes her over, because that seemed kind of out of character, and she should instead just playfully say that it was a lucky shot. There should also be more scenes of the Kyoshi warriors kicking ass. They took down a few guys in the original episode before getting defeated by Zuko, but we should really see them putting both Zuko and his men on their back foot, and them resorting to just torching all the houses because they can't defeat the Kyoshi warriors. In episode 5, Aang should have known that Bumi was the Prince of Omashu beforehand, and tells the king that he knew his ancestor, before then realizing that Bumi was actually still alive, and questioning how on earth he is still built like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Also, Bumi should tell Aang to come back to his city so he can teach him earthbending after he learns waterbending, and say that Omashu has been under constant siege by the Fire Nation. The way the creeping crystals grow so fast doesn't make much sense, so Bumi should have Sokka and Katara, I don't know, submerged in dissolved solvent water or something that would explain where all the added mass is coming from. In episode 6, it always fucking annoyed me how that Fire Nation guy threw the copper coins back to Haru's mother, because just why? I mean, I know you're clicking off this video because of how insignificant a gripe that is, but for real, why would you just pass up good money like that? Jeez. But anyway, to actual criticisms. When Katara is talking to Haru, she should tell him that she understands where he's coming from, as the Fire Nation took away all the benders from her tribe. It's for this reason that Sokka is much more concerned than in the original about Katara being taken away. There should also be more scenes with Haru's mother, like her telling them to just leave their village and focus on winning the war. And then later, after Haru gets taken, her screaming at Katara, telling her she is the reason she lost her son. It's really weird that Aang was acting so nonchalant and getting distracted when Katara was trying to get him to help in her plan of getting captured by the Fire Nation, when he was playing with that butterfly. So I would just cut that out. And also, Sokka and Katara should be wearing Earth Kingdom clothes during their plan to actually make him convincing. Also, later in the episode, the warden figures out that Katara is Water Tribe because she has blue eyes, a characteristic unique to the Water Tribe, and his men ask him what they should do, but he just allows her to continue being in prison because she amuses him. In the Ocean Rig, we see examples of how the prisoners are being brutalized and made to do forced labor for the Fire Nation. Since Sokka is the idea guy, it should be him who discovers that the Fire Nation rig is burning coal. Also, the "I hear cowards float" line was kind of cringe and made no sense, so I would just cut it out, and I would add a line from Tyro at the end saying how the Fire Nation may have been able to defeat them all by going village by village, but with all these Earthbenders united together, they don't stand a chance. In episode 7, the Earth Kingdom soldiers who capture Iroh should taunt him about losing his son and how the soldier who killed him saved the entire city, and also tell him he is going to be executed for his crimes against the Earth Kingdom, with Iroh clearly steaming, but holding himself back and fucking with them. Also, it's kind of unexplained in the original series why the Fire Nation would just randomly burn down a forest, and it would be explained by saying that they were in a battle and won it by just burning the forest around them for more ammunition, showing how little regard for the environment they have if it gets them victory. In episode 8, it made no sense how Zhao's ships were able to launch boulders above the clouds. So in my rewrite, he has the ships launch boulders above Appa to prevent him from flying any higher. Zuko's crew should be shown getting really pissed off at him for putting them in danger to try to get the Avatar back. There should also be added dialogue from Shyu telling Team Avatar how the Fire Sages were given a choice by Fire Lord Zhao Lynx. Either abandon the Avatar and serve only the Fire Nation, or die. And over time, as the sages passed on these new instructions to their children, any memory of the Fire Sages serving the Avatar faded away. However, Shayu's ancestors were the only ones who secretly taught their descendants the true purpose of the Fire Sages for so many decades. Shyu should also partially explain the Avatar state to Aang, telling him how it's something only a fully realized Avatar has control over, and gives the Avatar power over any other bender. Also, Sokka should be the one who realizes that his fake fire blast could also trick the fire sages, since he is, of course, the idea guy. Rather than just putting Aang's hands behind his back, Zuko should quietly sneak up on Aang and hold him by his mouth and not announce that he captured him, foreshadowing his role as the Blue Spirit Super Ninja later. Also, Zhao arresting the 5 Fire Nation sages doesn't make any sense, and he just kind of came off as an idiot in that moment, so he should only arrest Shayu, who was the one who did something wrong. In episode 9, I think it would actually be pretty cool if instead of the pirates being all non-benders, some could be earthbenders, others waterbenders, and others firebenders, showing directly how the dividing lines between the nations are not so rigid, and there are examples of groups made up of people from diverse backgrounds. Iroh should tell Zuko that his White Lotus tile is one of his most prized possessions, and as it was a gift to him by the great swordsmaster Pian Dao, as foreshadowing for later revelations. Also, Katara should not get mad at Aang after trying to learn the Water Whip like 3 times, and it should be edited to imply that she has been working on it for hours. That's actually something that Avatar does quite a few times that I noticed while rewatching the show. Like it happened in the Winter Solstice Part 1 as well, when Aang was waiting for Heibai to appear, and in all cases I would just add a bit to better showcase the passage of time. And I realize with me making a lot of additions to the episodes, I would make them a few minutes longer, but screw it. I think a lot of the Avatar episodes could actually benefit from a 27 or so minute runtime. But back to the episode, when Zuko is trying to convince Katara to give him Aang, he reminds her that he left her village alone just before, just like he said he would, and he only cares about the Avatar and will let her and her brother go free. But of course, Katara says that she won't let him capture the world's only hope for peace. In episode 10, I'm pretty sure that in the original episode, the town Jet was trying to blow up was, drown, was an Earth Kingdom one occupied by Fire Nation troops. In my rewrite, Jet would not be trying to kill his own people, and it would actually be a town full of Fire Nation colonial citizens. Rather than the conflict being over Jet sacrificing Earth Kingdom civilians, it would be over whether there's any difference between Fire Nation soldiers and civilians. The episode would start out with the old man in the village creating a doll for the little girl and going out on his travels peacefully, showing the audience a completely different side to the Fire Nation that we have seen before, and then show a shadowy figure watching from the distance, turning out later to be Jet. When Jet is arguing with Sokka, he says that there are no innocents in war, and simply living in the Earth Kingdom lands is an act of aggression. He says that he's given every warning for them to leave, and if they won't live somewhere else, then they're not going to live at all. Sokka is the member of the group that is the most prejudiced against the Fire Nation, so him turning around and telling Jet that he won't let him kill civilians, even if they are Fire Nation, would be even more satisfying, and he says that he told the authorities where Jet's camp is, so after the ice thaws he had better get out of there. Also, when Jet and his crew are fighting the Fire Nation soldiers at the beginning of the episode, they should be shown being much more brutal and actually trying to kill them before Aang intervenes. And later they are shown stabbing Fire Nation armor in vital spots back at their camp to vent aggression. Later, when they come across the old man in the forest, Jet and his crew are shown nearly beating him to death, really showing the brutality and hatred of these kids who have all been negatively impacted by the Fire Nation in some way. Also, after Sokka teases Katara about Jet being her boyfriend, Aang should get jealous and question Katara about it while trying to come off as aloof, as I always found it out of character how Aang never saw Jet as somewhat of a rival in the original episode. In addition to Jet being a romantic rival to Aang, Aang's stance on violence is also the exact opposites of Jet, and their relationship should have been more antagonistic in the episode, with him being more of an active character and questioning Jet as compared to the original. Also, rather than it just being a series of images, it would be cool if we could actually see Sokka's encounter with the villagers play out in flashback form, with them of course distrusting him at first because of his Water Tribe getup. The position of the Great Divide episode should be switched to after the storm and the Blue Spirit, thus making the storm episode 11 in my rewrite, and it will be made more clear why I'm making this change when I get to my rewrite of the Great Divide. In episode 11, I would have an added scene of Zuko's lieutenant talking to the crew about how they deserve to go back to see their families, as only Zuko was banished and not them, and they have been working a thankless job for almost 3 years with nothing to show for it, with more crew members than just him getting more focus and dialogue. In Aang's flashback, there should be more shown of him being isolated from the other kids than just him not being able to join in any reindeer games, and dialogue beforehand with them congratulating him on how much of an unnaturally good airbender he is, getting his master tattoos at age 12. Also, the horrible old man who tells Aang he turned his back on the world would also tell Aang that he lost both his sons in the war, giving him more of a personal reason to despise the Avatar. In episode 12, Zuko shouldn't be shown spying on Zhao at the beginning when he is promoted to Admiral, as not only does he end up learning that information later, but it's kind of ridiculous that he went there and managed to get back on the ship so fast like nothing happened. Also, it was never really explained why Zhao was promoted to Admiral in the first place, since we know the Fire Lord values strength, and Zhao has only been shown losing at this point. So the episode would first start out with the Fire Nation soldiers celebrating Zhao's great victory in battle, as he is a master strategist, and Ozai is rewarding him for his success in war and tasking him with hunting down the Avatar. There is a moment where the blue spirit grabs Aang by the mouth, like in my rewrite of episode 8, hinting at the fact that he is Zuko. Aang should be taking much greater care not to kill the guards, as in the original he was throwing them down like 7 stories without a care in the world. Finally, it was pretty stupid how in the original Zhao had the archer only hit the blue spirit to leave Aang to escape. So in my rewrite, there are 2 arrows shot, but one only grazes Aang, who moves to grab a frog that came out of his shirt. In episode 13, we would get to the Great Divide content, pushed forward in my rewrite, and being largely considered one of the worst episodes of the original series, I would make some significant changes to it. Firstly, while the Ganjins are portrayed as a family of nobles, while the Zhangs are portrayed as more of a hunter-gatherer society, the episode doesn't continually focus on one being clean and one being sloppy, with the 2 tribes instead constantly focused on the wrongs they feel the other tribe did to them in the past, and the wrongs that the other side has committed against them since. After Katara and Sokka meet up and tell each other the conflicting stories of the 2 tribes they heard, they don't just take one side and start arguing with the other. Instead, they remark on how history must have been muddled somehow and question who is right. Also, I think it would have been pretty cool to have a fight scene between the tribes and the canyon crawlers, chasing them off, and then Appa coming to lift them up to the top of the canyon, rather than just the riding of the dangerous beasts up the canyon like in the original. And come on, even without his arms, the Earthbender guy should have been able to do some earthbending with his legs. The way this episode concludes is also quite different from the original, and it has a bigger impact on the overall narrative. Aang doesn't just make up a story, and instead Aang basically tells the tribe that their feud is based off an incredibly insignificant event in the grand scheme of things, that none of them were even around to witness. He tells them how his entire culture was wiped out, which is far worse than what either tribe describes would happen in the past, but he is trying to move past it and focus on the present and not on petty vengeance. He tells them that whatever did happen in the past isn't important in the here and now, because right now all of them have lost their homes to the Fire Nation and need to unite for the common goal of getting to Ba Sing Se together. Since Aang does not lie in this version, it makes the resolution between the 2 tribes uniting to escape the Fire Nation much more genuine, and I also had the episode placed after the Storm and the Blue Spirit to give greater focus to Aang's character arc of not getting so hung up with the past, to tie into the plot of the episode. In episode 14, The Fortune Teller, Aang stopping the threat of volcanic destruction pretty much instantaneously by himself was pretty ridiculous originally. In my version, Aang tries to stop it by himself, but gets close to dying, but then enters the Avatar state, and having Roku's experience of dealing with volcanoes, manages to put a stop to it. Aunt Wu should explain at the end that even though she cannot predict the future or read the clouds, she can read people's chi paths, and that's how she was able to tell that Aang was going to be involved in a great end-of-the-world battle, meaning she is only a partial fraud. However, chi paths are not set in stone and only serve to guide one's future, but people can still branch away from those paths and claim their future for themselves. This would actually serve to set up Aang's resolution against the Fire Lord, as he broke away from what all his past lives were telling him he had to do and solved the problem his own way. In episode 15, Zuko says that ever since the Avatar crossed the Great Divide, he has been unable to track where he is. Yes, the episode has plot relevancy in my rewrite. I know a lot of people take issue with how Aang acts in this episode, saying it's out of character, with him lying to Sokka and Katara about the letter from their dad. But I honestly think Aang's characterization in this episode was fine and realistic for his situation, and I wouldn't change anything, except for the fact that, he should be disgusted by the animal pets in the tent, rather than just casually wearing one. Also, even though Bato doesn't get much focus in the show, I still think he's pretty cool, and I would have him go back with Sokka and Katara and participate in the fight in the end. In a bit of continuity, before they fight in the episode, Aang should try to talk to Zuko and ask why he's trying to capture him before Zuko then attacks him. I also thought it was really weird how after Zuko and June were defeated, the gang just left and we don't know what happened to them. In my rewrite, Aang and the gang consider imprisoning them, but then they look back to find them and they are gone, with Iroh having taken them away on his back. June tells him that if he tries to touch her, he's dead, and Iroh lets her down by a tree, where she screams at Iroh to pay her for the services she provided while he walks away with Zuko. In episode 16, when that stoner guy takes Aang and the gang to see Zhong, he tells them about the insane brainwashing and indoctrination the Fire Nation recruits go through, and that the penalty for deserting the army is death. He also tells them a bit about Zhong's past and how he was a lower-class Fire Nation colonial who had greater talent than most Fire Nation nobles, and rose through the ranks incredibly quickly to become one of the Fire Nation's most esteemed men, but gave it all up when he couldn't deal with how much destruction he was causing, burning down villages filled with innocent people and children. And there's also a bit of extra dialogue from Zhong to Zhao about how he thinks only of destruction and hatred, and revels in horrible acts, and so he is the true savage rather than the enemies he wishes to destroy. Also, back at the festival, we would see magic tricks and disappearing acts done using colored fire, and then Zhong would escape using the same trick later in the episode. In episode 17, there should be some added dialogue between Aang and the Mechanist, with the Mechanist saying that if the people who once lived there no longer do, then what is the point of perfectly preserving everything? But Aang arguing that it should be perfectly preserved precisely because there are no more people there, and that the temple is all that remains in them. The inhabitants of the Northern Air Temple shouldn't be fighting with stink bombs and slime bombs, because that's just kind of childish, and the battle should also be more brutal, with quite a few Fire Nation soldiers dying, and Aang trying to save their lives throughout the battle. Also, there should be a scene of Sokka and the Mechanist using the rotten eggs to find the gas leak, before they then later smell rotten eggs during the battle. And before the explosion, the Mechanist should be very concerned about it bringing down the temple, but with only the bottom part of it being damaged, and none of its people inside being injured by it. Also, it was really weird in the original how the firebending minister arrived very quickly after the Mechanist was just chilling with Sokka trying to fix the gas leak. So in my version, there's quite a bit of a time jump until he gets there. In episode 18, Zhao should mention how Zuko once trained with the great swordsmaster Pian Dao after he turned out to be a complete failure in firebending, with him piecing it together as an explanation for why the Blue Spirit was so skilled. Also, unlike in the original episode, there is a scene of Zuko's crew getting a proper send-off, telling Zuko it was an honor to serve him, but him lashing out and calling them traitors. Also in this episode, there should be more scenes detailing the culture of the Water Tribe and expanding on the character of the chief. He is a non-bender, but his wife is a bender, and his two sons are, while his daughter is not. When Katara is questioning Pakku, the chief interjects and tells Katara that she is interfering with sacred Water Tribe cultural practices and gives some bullshit religious spiritual justification for why women have to be second-class citizens, showing that Pakku isn't just a bad egg, and he tells her that the Southern Water Tribe used to hold to these same sacred traditions, and it probably fell because it abandoned them, unlike the North, with some very clear parallels between religious groups in the world. Alright, still recording. Alright. However, then Sokka interjects with his character arc coming around and his sexist attitude, saying that what the chief is saying makes no sense, and the Water Tribe changed and adapted because it needed more fighters to repel the Fire Nation. And it makes no logical sense to bar half their fighting force from battle, especially since the Fire Nation could be on their doorstep with the Avatar there. The episode would actually end with Pakku realizing who Katara's necklace belonged to and Yue running off, and Iroh deciding to join Zhao, with it being a mystery whether Zuko survived the explosion or not. Also, Zhao would mention to Iroh that he never had a son, but as someone who did lose his son, feeling that grief must be devastating for Iroh. And here's where we get to a significant difference in my rewrite, which is that there should be another episode at the end of the first season fleshing out the Northern Water Tribe with more multiple new plotlines introduced. In episode 19, it would be revealed that Zuko is still alive, and expand more on his plan to infiltrate and on the politics of the Water Tribe, and give more focus to Pakku's decision to train Katara. Pakku tells Katara that after her grandmother left him, he actually traveled the world seeking to find another way to see himself, only to later come back to the Water Tribe and fall back into his old ways, foreshadowing the later reveal of him being a White Lotus member. And he tells Katara that he would be honored to teach her, but it's doubtful the Water Tribe Council would approve, or make teaching women a regular practice. However, Katara proves herself over the course of the episode, dedicating incredible effort to her studies, and it doesn't hurt that the Avatar continually vouches for her. Also, there should probably be more scenes of Aang training as well, rather than just kind of goofing off. Back with Zuko, Iroh tries to talk him out of his plan to capture the Avatar, but he tells Iroh that he doesn't have a crew or a ship anymore, and this might be the last chance he gets to capture the Avatar when he knows where he is. Meanwhile, there would be more scenes with Sokka and Yue, with them trying to act like friends, and Yue explaining the reason for her white hair here rather than out of left field later in the finale. One other minor change I actually prefer from the Shyamalan adaptation. And Yue explaining to Sokka that women are simply not treated the same as men in the North, and have to obey their fathers and husbands, and Sokka getting suspiciously a lot more into women's rights activism. Speaking of which, there should be more scenes of the Chief and his wife, with them both basically getting almost no focus in the original, with her sympathizing with Yue and telling him that maybe he shouldn't make her marry the guy she is engaged to, but the Chief saying it's important for the tribe as he is the son of an important general. It would also show how the Chief is clearly being somewhat resentful over the fact that his wife is a bender while he isn't, while also at the same time maybe starting to reconsider his precious traditions he holds on to so much. Also, we would actually see some of the warrior training Sokka talks about in the original series. Then from there, the episode would play out quite similar to the first 8 minutes or so of episode 19 of the original series, with Zhao setting sail for the Northern Water Tribe, the people seeing the black snow, and the episode ending with Aang proclaiming that he wasn't there when the Fire Nation attacked his people, and is going to make a difference this time. In episode 20, things start out with action right out of the gate, with the Fire Nation attacking, and we actually get to see more of the Water Tribe and Aang taking down the Fire Nation ships, unlike how in the original a lot of it was off-screen. Yue's suitor Han is also giving more focus, acting like a creep around Yue and telling her that she belongs to him, with Sokka sticking up for women's rights like a Chad male feminist, but then Han tells him that he's only doing so because he's selfish and wants Yue for himself, and the rules of the Northern Water Tribe don't benefit a lowly southern peasant like him, and it's after this that the two get into a fight. Also, it was a bit confusing why the Chief asked Sokka to guard his daughter Yue in the original, and in my version it's more heavily implied that he did it more so that Yue could be happy for at least a little bit before he marries her off. He tells Sokka he is a great warrior with a lot of potential, and how it is a shame he was lowborn. From there, things pretty much play out how they do in the original, with Zhao attacking and Zuko infiltrating and capturing Aang. The episode would end with Roku telling Aang that he needs to go see Ko the Face Stealer while his body is still being held by Zuko in the cave. In episode 21, it starts out with Zuko's monologue about his sister, and then the events play out pretty similar to the original. Also, Han's death at the hands of Admiral Admiral Zhao would be even darker and funnier in my rewrite, with a line from a soldier immediately afterwards to Zhao saying how all the other infiltrators were killed pretty easily. However, I would add quite a few more scenes of the Water Tribe kicking the Fire Nation's ass when it becomes nighttime, as well as the Chief fighting with his warriors, chanting Black Panther style, really playing up the epicness of the battle. However, due to his limitations, being a non-bender, he gets injured on the battlefield, and his wife, who is revealed to be incredibly powerful, comes to save him and fight off a bunch of Fire Nation soldiers. I would have Zuko making a speech to Iroh before killing... I would have Zhao making a speech to Iroh before killing the Moon Spirit that the Fire Nation cannot afford to be afraid of the spirits because they have now become the gods of this world. Again, one minor alteration I actually like from the Shyamalan movie, and also rather than Zhao just running away from Iroh, he actually tries to fight him and gets utterly stomped and runs away. Like a bitch. Then later during the rematch, Zuko scars Zhao's face with a fire blast while he's distracted looking at the restored moon, and as he promised he wouldn't hold back in episode 3. I would add a bit of dialogue from Yue where Sokka tells her he won't let her sacrifice herself, and Yue tells him to let her make her own choices for once. And also Sokka should question Iroh since he is Fire Nation. Aang's siege on the Fire Nation ships should have been more brutal, with it being shown how a lot of the men on the ships are clearly not making it out alive, including Zuko's men who are killed by the fish spirit Aang. There should also be a more extended epilogue scene with a funeral for all the soldiers who died in the battle, and the Chief should talk to Sokka about how he took his daughter for granted and never really let her be who she wanted her to be. Never let her be who she wanted to be. And he says that he will have to be reconsidering a lot of things. When Pakku tells Katara he is going to the Southern Water Tribe to rebuild it, she questions him if he is going to make it all regressive and stuff, but Pakku reassures her that that isn't the case, and the Northern Water Tribe has actually been greatly affected by her presence there. And finally, as my last alteration, the scene with Azula and Ozai should have been a post-credit scene, and not the last one in this franchise of my rewrites. Drink. Alright then, anyway, with my alterations Season 1 now complete, let's move on to Season 2. Relatively minor alterations here as well, at least until we get to the second half of the season. In Episode 1, Aang has a conversation with Katara about how many people she thinks he killed when he was fused with the Ocean Spirit, and him saying that he doesn't think he can handle what the Avatar state can make him do. Also, Zuko tells his uncle in the episode that he is still trying to capture the Avatar and they will need to move fast if they have any hope of catching him. Rather than the Fire Nation guy just accidentally letting it slip that Iroh and Zuko are prisoners, he should actually be someone in the Fire Nation who is hesitant to arrest members of the royal family, like Azula talked about, especially Iroh, who he once fought with, and tries to subtly tell him that it's a trap, and then fights alongside him. But Azula ends up killing him very quickly, immediately establishing herself as a deadly threat. Also, fingernails are not really that strong, and rather than sharpening them, Azula should be wearing shorter versions of those weird finger daggers the Earth Queen wears in The Legend of Korra. And Zuko should have the scars he gets from Azula in the episode stay with him for the show, as do many of his injuries he received from being blown up last season. Azula also taunts him even more aggressively, asking him if he has actually gotten worse since she last saw him, and if he is suffering from vision loss due to his scar. Damn, Azula. We also see in greater detail the gory carnage Aang visits upon the Earth Kingdom soldiers, with a lot of them being severely injured and bloody. In Episode 2, I would actually show some parts of Azula recruiting Ty Lee and Zuko and Iroh trying to survive as refugees both in this episode, with parts of them being shown in the next episode as well, giving a kind of narrative consistency since both episodes follow from one another in the original. Also, seeing as how strong and athletic Ty Lee is, she should be ripped as fuck rather than her relatively dainty figure we see in the original series. And that's actually the case for all the women in this series who showcase great athletic prowess, like Azula, Mai, and Suki. Other than that, no changes to the episode. In Episode 3, it should probably be explained a little more about Bumi's intentions for completely surrendering so easily, with him realizing that the Fire Nation had superior numbers and technology, and he made a deal with them to give the whole city, while he told his Earthbenders to retreat so they wouldn't end up in labor camps. Though some stayed behind to form the resistance, and also Bumi should have called Aang's plan of getting all the citizens outside the city mad genius. Also, since it's weird we never saw Bumi with any children in the original series, the guy who says they should fight and who says they should stay and fight should be his son or grandson or whatever in my rewrite. I would actually make a few additions to Mai's character, as her motivations were not always the most clear in the original series. We see more of how controlling her parents are to her, like we heard about in the beach episode, with her joking about how Azula has come to rescue her from her garden tower. But it is also clear that while Mai wants to join Azula on her mission and travel the world, she is also a bit uncomfortable that she will have to be capturing Zuko, and later Azula makes her prove her loyalty to her. In my rewrite, Mai actually has concern for her brother Tom Tom and questions Azula when she says he isn't worth giving up for King Bumi, but then Azula puts her sharp finger thingies around Mai's neck, pressuring her to comply, showing how much both Mai and Ty Lee fear her. In Episode 4, Team Avatar should talk about what their goal is now that Aang can't train with Bumi, with Sokka saying that they should just head straight to the Earth Kingdom capital, as Aang could surely find an earthbending master there, rather than just wandering around aimlessly. In Episode 5, Zuko tells Iroh that they need to move quickly if they're ever going to find the Avatar again, with Zuko still trying to track him, and Iroh telling him that he needs to slow down and accept the fact that he might never be able to get the Avatar again. Also in my rewrite, Kyoshi actually does just straight up kill Chin the Conqueror, rather than simply allowing him to fall to his death, because she does not fuck around. Also in my rewrite, while Suki took some of the Kyoshi warriors out to help with Earth Kingdom refugees, some stayed behind and actually go back with Sokka and Katara to try to prove Aang's innocence, and they assist in their fight against the Rough Rhinos, because it's a pretty bad showing when in the original they got their asses kicked by just Aang, Sokka, and Katara. In Episode 6, the Fire Nation man should be given a backstory about how he was born to a Fire Nation mother and Earth Kingdom father in the Yudao colonies, and practices his earthbending in service of the Fire Lord because I like him. Also, Toph's parents should do more rich people political talk about how they are so concerned about the state of the war, meanwhile it hasn't affected them in the slightest. In Episode 7, there should be more of a montage in the beginning of Zuko going from place to place in the desert on a horse with no name, trying to track down Aang while being wary of any wanted posters of himself. Also, it should be established why the soldiers are staying at the village. It got raided by some Fire Nation soldiers a few months ago, so these soldiers were stationed there to protect it, but all they do is leech off the people there. There is a scene where one of the villagers asks the Earthbender for some help with construction repairs, to which he responds, "I'm a proud soldier of the Earth Kingdom, not a construction worker." Fitting with her circus freak nickname, Ty Lee should be portrayed as an ugly duckling in the flashback, contrasting how beautiful she becomes later. Also, since Azula is a human child and not a demon, she should probably not be smiling while watching her grandfather about to burn her father alive, and Azulon should have blue fire to match his name. In Zuko's fight with the Earthbender, the setting sun should have been directly behind him, as if a bright light is showing out from him, symbolic of how he gets his power from the sun. In Episode 8, there probably should have been a scene or two more of Zuko trying to track the Avatar rather than him just randomly showing up and finding the trail made by Azula. Now I have to talk about the ending of this chase scene because it's just very weird in the original. Firstly, it makes no sense why Aang would just wait for Azula to find him after trying to use Appa's fur as a diversion to get away from her. So in my reread, Azula follows Aang in the tank and catches up to him, like Mai and Ty Lee do to Sokka and Katara. Also, it doesn't make much sense how Sokka and Katara get back to Aang so fast to help him fight Azula, especially considering how tired Appa was. In my rewrite, after the baddies catch up to Aang and Appa, they both try to use what little they have left in the tank to meet up with each other to fight them. And they intersect together at the old abandoned ghost town with Zuko, and then Iroh and Toph show up again. And it turns into an all-out brawl between Azula and her crew and Team Avatar and Zuko and Iroh, with Azula eventually being on her own after Ty Lee and Mai are defeated and Toph destroys the train and incapacitates the men inside it, which would give even more opportunities to showcase everyone working together to defeat her. Since Toph has seismic sense, she should be able to tell where Azula runs off to, but they don't chase her because they're worried about Iroh. In Episode 9, Zuko should mention to Iroh that he still wants to capture the Avatar, but is more concerned with dealing with Azula first, who is a bigger threat. Also, Iroh tells Zuko that after his son Lu Ten died, he traveled all over the world in disguise, trying to find himself, which is how he knows so much that other members of the Fire Nation don't. And Zuko is initially resistant to learn ideas from other nations, but comes to accept it in the end. There should also be a scene in the episode of Zuko scaling the mountain. Finally, there was no reason for Toph to leave her eyes uncovered in the earth armor she created in the episode, so that should be a fixed bug. In Episode 10, Sokka would ask Professor Zay if he could apply his knowledge to help them plan the war effort, but Professor Zay would say that he isn't allowed to, foreshadowing the reveal of what Ba Sing Se is like later. He also mentions that the cantina near the ice springs is the most wretched hive of scum and villainy, with plenty of people who would sell exotic creatures like Appa and Momo for a quick buck. I would actually make some other pretty significant additions to this episode. Team Avatar spends longer in the library than they do in the original series, as it's such a cool location, and since it's a massive library with a lot of information, it would provide a good chance to learn some stuff about the world before Sokka goes to find the information on the Fire Nation. Specifically, the lion turtles are not an offhanded mention as they are in the original series. They needed way more of a build-up for the ending to not come off as kind of a Deus Ex Machina. Instead, in my reread, Aang finds a book about them written in an ancient Airbender text that he struggles to read. By the way, one thing I would change in my reread is that all the different nations actually have different writing systems, with Aang being able to understand a bit of all of them since he's been all over the world before. The gang finds written in the book that the lion turtles are the largest animals on the planet, rivaling the power of the spirits, and humankind once started their civilizations on their backs. The lion turtles also gave the gift of bending to humans in order to protect themselves and flourish. But then they used it against one another, and later to kill the lion turtles, making them extinct. Later in the episode, Wan Shi Tong says that just like how the lion turtle gave humans the gift of bending for benevolence, and they used it for evil, he gave humans the gift of knowledge, and they used it for evil. In my rewrite, the episode ends with Sokka deciding to stay to check the date for the next solar eclipse, specifically when one will occur over the Fire Nation, since solar eclipses are not a worldwide event, and the Sandbenders showing up. In Episode 11, after Team Avatar escapes the library and the Sandbenders take Appa, the rest of the episode will be entirely focused on Aang's journey. The gang's journey to make it out of the desert alive, with no Zuko and Iroh subplot, really feeling the desperation as they are dying from dehydration. Also, there should be a moment of realization for Aang where he realizes he was a dick for leaving everyone in the desert alone and abandons his search for Appa to go back for them, apologizing. Also, when the gang get to the rock, they question why it is out there in the first place and remark on how, in a map they found at the library, the desert used to be filled with lush vegetation, as a bit of world building, showing how the climate has changed due to a meteorite impact. The episode would end how Episode 11 of this series did originally. In Episode 12, we would of course get the Zuko and Iroh stuff, and there would be quite a bit of added content. After Zuko and Iroh escape the guys trying to capture them in the flower pots, June actually catches up with them. A lot of people have rightly pointed out how it was weird that June the bounty hunter never tried to capture Zuko and Iroh after they became outlaws, especially since she had a less than friendly history with them. In my rewrite, she does, saying that their bounty will more than pay for the debt they owe her, and she tracked them using a perfume bottle she grabbed that Iroh had his hands all over. She paralyzes Iroh, and then it's up to Zuko to face her, and a fight breaks out with him on a mere ostrich horse. However, then Zuko and Iroh are both saved by White Lotus members who are given more focus, and Iroh gives a bit more of an explanation to Zuko about how the White Lotus is a society that transcends the divisions of the four nations. Zuko questions how they can possibly trust Earth Kingdom citizens who know that they are Fire Nation royalty. And in my rewrite, there's a scene of Zuko actually fighting with Iroh on going to Ba Sing Se because he hasn't given up on finding the Avatar yet. However, Iroh puts his foot down, telling him that going to Ba Sing Se is the only way they can be safe, as more and more bounty hunters are going to chase after them now that they have wanted posters with updated faces since Azula saw them. And that Ba Sing Se does not allow bounty hunters into its walls. After a lot of angsty bickering, Zuko reluctantly agrees that Ba Sing Se is their best option, for now at least, and we see them go to the ferry boats. Meanwhile, on Aang's end, we see the Sandbenders helping them out of the desert, and the group heading off to Ba Sing Se. And we get more of a sense of Aang's struggle with losing Appa, rather than how in the original he just transitioned to moody teen very quickly. And of course, Suki reappears again by the ferries with the other Kyoshi warriors, and so does Jet with Zuko and Iroh. The episode ends with Aang saying that he will lead the refugees to the Serpent's Pass. In episode 13, things play out pretty similar to how they do in the original, with Aang and crew going past the Serpent's Pass. Also, Katara shouldn't be able to read the Abandon Hope message, since, as I said before, the world of Avatar should have different written languages for each nation. Things go pretty similar on Aang's end, but I would add some stuff to Jet and Zuko's storyline. First off, the whole gang that was there in the treehouse should be there with Jet, because it was just weird in the original series how Jet was the only one there with Smellerby and Longshot. Jet should be more open about his past and what the Fire Nation did to him, giving Zuko more experiences with how the Fire Nation has hurt people, and it also divulges more clearly how he was taking his hatred for the Fire Nation too far, but the Avatar showed him that there were other things he could do to help people. So after he and his crew escaped from the Fire Nation, he basically became a Robin Hood-like figure, helping poor refugees to get to Ba Sing Se, like the Kyoshi warriors, though unofficially in their case. Also, there should be more interactions between Jet's crew, and it should be made more clear that Smellerby is actually transgender, which is a theory that a lot of people had for her character in headcanon, and I think it would be pretty cool. Jet would find out that Iroh was a firebender, and then the episode would end with Aang noticing the giant drill about to reach Ba Sing Se and reveal Azula inside of it. In episode 14, things would focus on the original events of the drill. In the original episode, it was kind of ridiculous that Ty Lee defeated all those Earthbenders single-handedly. They should attack with a squad of Firebenders, and May should get some more on-screen action. Let's talk about Team Avatar's plan to take down the drill, because in the original episode it made no sense. The idea that cutting through part of the braces was easier than cutting through an entire one, sort of made sense, but it's not like cutting through half or even 3/4 as we saw one of them in the original episode would make things go much faster, and just cutting through the whole brace probably would have done more damage. So let's think about how to rewrite this plan with just a simple change. The gang do infiltrate the inside of the drill and start trying to cut through the braces, but this time they figure out that cutting through the screws and bolts is all they need to do to severely weaken the braces, even though it looks like they are still sturdy. So that is what they do. And also, it is made clear that Aang is going to deliver the final blow above the hydraulic system, since in the original, it kind of seemed like he was doing it in a random place. And before he does, he uses super speed to get down to the hydraulic station to warn everyone there to leave, since he doesn't want to kill anyone. Also, there should be a longer fight scene inside the drill, because that was such a cool location. Also, it would actually show Azula and the Fire Nation escaping, since the last Airbender had a nasty habit of showing the villain getting defeated, but not showing what happened afterwards. The episode would end with the gang making it to the great city of Ba Sing Se and being amazed at how huge it is. In episode 15, it would cover the content from the City of Walls and Secrets, with not too many additions. One would be a better explanation of the governmental structure of the city, with the social classes being entirely separated by the walls, and you aren't allowed to live in the middle or upper ring if you don't have enough money. Due to the resources of the White Lotus, Zuko and Iroh make it to the middle ring because the place they were staying at seemed way too nice for the lower ring, meaning that Jet has to illegally sneak into the middle ring to go after them, and Smellerby and Longshot go with him. From there, the episode plays out pretty much exactly like how it did originally. In episode 16, we get to the Tales of Ba Sing Se, of course. Quite honestly, while this episode is one of many people's favorites in the series, I don't really think it's the best, mostly due to the tales outside of the ones for Zuko and Iroh. I would make some alterations to it. Firstly, I feel that it would be better to have all the tales be told simultaneously, with the episode starting out with Zuko and Iroh and Team Avatar waking up. After Iroh scores Zuko a date with Jin, which starts out in the daytime, he tells his boss that he has to go out to the outer ring for something. And his tale pretty much plays out exactly like how it does in the original, though perhaps with an added scene of him helping out an Earth Kingdom soldier who's lost his son. Zuko's tale goes about the same, only maybe with a few more added scenes of him and Jin bonding, and her telling Zuko more about herself and her family, and asking Zuko where he got the scar, and her being confused when he says he got it from the Fire Nation, since obviously Jin wouldn't know anything of the war. I'm actually going to be joining the tale of Sokka and Katara and Toph together, where all three go out on a night on the town together with the new Ju Di as their chaperone, since it's really weird how the show kind of forgot about her, which would open up more character interactions between Toph and Sokka, because they are one of my favorite duos in the series. And they all got pretty annoyed with how the nobility and the prissy people act in the upper ring. The same basic beats still happen with Toph showcasing her confidence herself, and Sokka doing his poetry slam. Meanwhile, Aang and Momo's tales are joined together and changed, with the story being more serious and showcasing Aang's struggle to find Appa, while Dai Li agents watch his every move. He never frees all the animals from the zoo, but once Momo is captured to be slaughtered for meat, being the precious vegan soy boy that he is, Aang frees all the animals, and the episode ends with Momo and Aang finding the Appa footprint. In episode 17, it's Appa's Lost Days, and quite frankly, I wouldn't change a single thing about this episode, which might be the only episode of the show I can say that about. It's pretty much perfect. In episode 18, things will mostly be following the events of Lake Laogai. The episode, of course, starts out with Team Avatar creating Appa posters, now with more desperation as Aang saw the Appa footprint. In the original episode, Zuko's decision to go after Appa felt really weird for me. Why didn't Zuko just go after Aang, since the Appa poster surely would have had directions to the house Team Avatar was staying at? In my rewrite, Zuko does go to capture Aang and walks straight up to their house, but notices that Dai Li agents are secretly stationed everywhere and just keeps walking. It then shows more of Zuko's plan to infiltrate the Dai Li hideout than we saw in the original, with him killing several Dai Li agents he captures before one finally talks. Then later it showcases a classic Blue Spirit infiltration sequence rather than it happening off-screen. His plan is to threaten to kill Appa in exchange for Aang and force Aang to fly Appa and him out of there. As I said before, Jet's whole gang is with him, so Team Avatar would meet up with more than just Smellerby and Longshot, and all of them would get a chance to shine in the fight under the lake. Also, when Jet flashes back to the Fire Nation's attack on the village, I think it would be pretty cool if it was actually Zhong who attacked instead of the forgettable Rough Rhinos. Also, the episode should show how Iroh got into the Dai Li hideout, since in the original he just kind of teleported there. The episode would end with Iroh's epic speech to Zuko about finding what it is he wants to do. In episode 9, we get to Jet's death, which in the original series was, let's be honest, kind of bullshit, so much so that the Ember Island players made fun of it later on. And unsurprisingly, in my version, it's quite different. Jet manages to overcome his brainwashing, but Dr. Doofenshmirtz would be proud because Long Fang didn't leave out the self-destruct button. He pulls out a particular whistle, and Jet hears it and stabs himself through the heart with his weapon, and it does show blood. After and before he breaks free, Long Fang talks about how Jet is a loyal subject of the Earth Kingdom who will serve his nation and king and eliminate anyone who threatens them, really hammering home the irony of his death. Jet's crew holds the Dai Li off before they can eventually get captured, and Team Avatar escapes. Then things pretty much play out the same as in the original, with Team Avatar storming the palace, and it should just be one long fight scene so as not to break up the action. And Appa should get more time to shine in the fight. Also, Aang says that the Fire Lord killed their friend, not brainwashed him, obviously. There are some added parts to this section, with Zuko having an extra first vision about if he decided to stay in Ba Sing Se and started a family with Jin, before he sees the whole city burning down around him, When he sees a vision of his mother saying, "Help me," she is wearing a blue spirit mask since it was hers and Zuko had just dropped in the water. Also, since the Earth King is more fleshed out in the episode, with him divulging that he is 21 years old and his father died when he was 4, leaving Long Fang to take over as King Regent, and how Long Fang was responsible for all his education. There are also more scenes of King Kuei actually talking to his citizens, like, for example, when they make it to the wall and General Hao meets the Earth King for the first time. He is shocked that he doesn't even know a war is going on, considering they're all fighting in his name. All of Zuko's visions would be shown in the episode, and it would end with Team Avatar celebrating as they finally get the support of the Earth King for the invasion, before it then cuts to Long Fang's prison, with his second-in-command, telling him that the Dai Li are still loyal to him. Need some water. This is where we're going to get into some major additions. The last 2 episodes of the season will be split into 3 to flesh things out more, much like what I did in Season 1. In Episode 20, it starts out with General Hao revealing all the things that Long Fang kept hidden, and then it actually shows Jet's crew being released from the Dai Li prison because of what actually happened to them in the original series, and they reconvene with Aang and continue being characters up to the finale. Of course, everyone goes their separate ways, and Toph's kidnappers mention how, even though the bounty hunters aren't allowed in the city, the Beifong Seal sure can do a lot. There should also be more scenes of Sokka interacting with the Water Tribe men to make them really feel like comrades, and Aang probably shouldn't speedrun through his chakra openings either. I would also add stuff to Zuko's story as he and Jin actually meet up again, because even though she didn't have much screen time originally, I like Jin, and she should have been more than just one episode. To showcase how much Zuko has changed, he actually lets himself be happy, kisses Jin, and says that he is going to visit her all the time in the Middle Ring. In his own awkward Zuko way, of course. It's anything but smooth. Also, there should be more to the planning to invade the Fire Nation, with General Hao stating how they could easily crush the Fire Nation homeland with the forces just stationed in Ba Sing Se. But that the real problem is troop transport, as the Earth Kingdom has an incredibly undeveloped navy. After which Katara says that they can defer to the water tribes in that aspect. The episode would end with Azula revealing that she let the Dai Li listen on them intentionally, and that they will deliver the message. In episode 12, it starts with Aang trying to open up the 4th chakra and dealing with his grief. In my rewrite, Jet's gang are still there, now out of prison, and they are talking with Katara while she is going out for tea, mentioning the guy in the tea shop Jet thought was Fire Nation. And after they describe his scar, Katara knows who it is and goes to find them rather than just running into them like in the original. Azula captures Katara and also some of the freedom fighters in my version, which should probably happen after she allies with the Dai Li, as they would need to cover up the evidence. Speaking of which, Azula's infiltration of the Dai Li has a lot of added content in my rewrite. In the original, it made no sense why the Dai Li would ally with Azula. I mean, I guess they were afraid of her, but they could have just taken her easily with all of them there. In my rewrite, Long Fang would have a second-in-command, and Azula would manipulate him, telling him that Long Fang didn't really care about the security of the Earth Kingdom, and is just a ladder climber, and that he is a much more worthy leader who can do right by the Earth Kingdom. Later, she tells him that the Fire Nation is planning to burn down Ba Sing Se with Sozin's comet from the sky using hot air balloons. And the second-in-command guy tells her that she is a fool for divulging such information, and now that Ba Sing Se, and that now Ba Sing Se can simply hold her at ransom so the Fire Lord won't attack. But then Azula tells him he is a fool if he thinks the Fire Lord wouldn't get rid of her for an easy victory, and that her father's children are just tools to him that he will burn and throw away if they are no longer useful to him, like what happened with Zuko, showing how she is completely aware of how little her father actually cares for her. He then offers the second-in-command guy a deal that he can become the new leader of the Dai Li, and that Ba Sing Se will be spared from destruction, and that the Fire Nation will only occupy it, with the Dai Li acting as a puppet governing body. Zuko gets captured by Azula, having very weak fire blasts since his rage has diminished, and the episode would end with Zuko being thrown into the catacombs with Katara. In episode 22, the finale, it would start with Aang making it back to the house, with several of the freedom fighters still there, and wondering where everyone else went. There's a longer, more epic fight scene ensuing between the fake Kyoshi warriors and Toph, Sokka, and the freedom fighters, and they get captured and sent to prison with the other freedom fighters. Now let's talk about Azula's final confrontation with Long Fang. She would, of course, mention how she made a deal with his second-in-command, and he told her of his past and how he came from nothing, rather than just seeing it in his eyes or whatever. And she challenges him to a fight to rule over Ba Sing Se, charging up her lightning, and he looks like he might fight back, but surrenders. And after Azula says her iconic line, "You were never even a player," she shoots her with the lightning and kills him, telling the Dai Li that anyone who goes against the Fire Nation will end up like him. From there on, there are just some minor additions, like actually seeing more of Toph, Sokka, and the Freedom Fighters escaping from prison, and the Freedom Fighters asking to be left behind so that Sokka and Toph can get going on Appa to get to Aang as fast as they can. Katara and Zuko should get more interactions with him telling her how he has no idea what happened to his mother, and about the things he has experienced while being a refugee of the Fire Nation, and also thanking her for offering to heal his uncle before, in a bit of continuity. Iroh should tell Zuko that he has a choice to either stay and fight with the Avatar and protect their new home or run. And that he will support him in either option before Azula comes in and offers him a third, goading him about how if he doesn't have any loyalty to his country, then he has no honor. But with Iroh telling Zuko that love of one's country does not mean blind loyalty, and what the Fire Nation is doing, and what he did in Ba Sing Se all those years ago, was wrong, plain and simple. What happened to those two Dai Li agents that Azula had in the original? Katara and Aang should fight them off before Zuko arrives. Iroh should get a scene escaping his bonds and a longer fight between the Dai Li as he keeps getting battered until he can't stand, similar to Tenzin in The Legend of Korra. Aang's death should be completely without music and muted sound effects to make it more somber, and he shouldn't come to and smile at Katara briefly, since he is supposed to have been in a coma, and Katara should only feel his heartbeat. The episode would end with a post-credits scene of Azula telling Zuko he redeemed his honor. Alright, let's see if this is still recording. Alright, with Season 2 done for, now we get on to Season 3, and even though Season 3 is my favorite of the original series, I'm actually going to make the most additions here to tie up any loose ends that the original series left, and it actually has 5 extra episodes compared to the original season. In Episode 1, it actually follows directly after the end of Season 2, with the gang trying to escape Ba Sing Se, and they try to get as many people out as possible after saving Aang, rescuing the Freedom Fighters, some Earth Kingdom troops loyal to the Earth King, and even some members of the tribes of the group we met in the Great Divide episode who made it to Ba Sing Se, showing that episode wasn't just filler. It will be an episode where Aang is in a coma the entire time, showing the events of the scrapped Season 3 premiere, Escape from the Spirit World, where Aang reconnects with his Avatar spirit. I honestly really don't know why they cut this episode, as it was pretty cool and gave the audience a chance to learn a lot of the cool details about the 4 previous Avatars that are just kind of glossed over in the finale. Meanwhile, in our universe, after escaping, the gang make it back to Sokka's dad with the Earth King, and the harbor gets attacked by an overwhelming second wave from the Fire Nation, and it looks as though all hope is lost. And then it cuts to Ba Sing Se being taken over by the Fire Nation, and the cabin merchant's cabbages should be lit on fire, because how come we didn't get to see him in Season 3? Not the most upbeat premiere. The episode would end with Aang waking up from the Fire Navy ship. Also, it is in this episode that Roku tells Aang to go to his home on the solstice, since in the original it kind of came out of nowhere in a dream. In Episode 2, it would start out with Aang realizing he's actually on a captured ship. It was ridiculous in the original how the Earth King just decided to go off and travel the world with Bosco. No, he has to face the consequences of it in action, and in my rewrite, Sokka would tell Aang that the Earth King is in disguise around the Earth Kingdom with some royal soldiers gathering talented warriors for the invasion, and Longshot and Smellerbee with some other freedom... and that Longshot and Smellerbee left with some other freedom fighters to go too. He also tells Aang that they ran into the Mechanist who is now making weapons for the Earth Kingdom, and that he created contact lenses for the people of the Water Tribe to hide their blue eyes, which Sokka ends up bringing to the Fire Nation later. On Zuko's end, there are some more additions to his conversation with Mai, where it is clear that the two were dating before he was banished, and she tells him that he was one of the only people that made her happy before, but Zuko warns her he is a very different person than when he left. Other than that, the episode pretty much plays like it did originally, though it ends with Zuko going to see Iroh but getting turned away. In Episode 3, the events of the headband would play out with perhaps some more scenes showing the Fire Nation indoctrination, and Aang attending more classes, and the teacher calling the Air Nomads brutish savages, and that attempts to do apologetics for them will end in expulsion. Also, the bully who attacked Aang was a firebender, and it should show how firebenders get special treatment, being seen as the pride of the nation. And he also actually uses his bending against Aang rather than just flailing angrily at him. The rest of the episode plays out as it did originally, but Zuko's last 2 scenes in the original Headband episode will be moved to later to make room for the extra content in this episode. In episode 4, I'm actually going to be switching the order of events around, with this being the Sokka's Master episode rather than the Painted Lady. I did this for 2 reasons. 1, because 2 episodes in a row focusing on how the Fire Nation citizens are victims of the Fire Nation is a bit too repetitive, and also I'm showing the Iroh. Also, I am moving the Iroh stuff that was originally in Sokka's Master, very out of place in my opinion, to later, as he has no room for it here to start with. So that there is room here for it to start with Zuko's scene telling Iroh that he will solve his Avatar problem himself, and then end with him hiring Combustion Man. That butler who answers the door should tell Sokka that the Master is so esteemed as a trained Prince Zuko himself, so he would have no time for him. When Piandao asks Sokka to write his name, it is to confirm his suspicion of him being Water Tribe, as of course in my reread, Sokka doesn't know how to write Fire Nation characters. There should probably be more scenes of Sokka actually training, rather than him doing random things like painting rainbows in the original, and it is made clear that he is training over the course of multiple days, not just a single one. In my opinion, it sucks out a lot of the tension of Sokka's fight with Piandao with the Team Avatar there, so in my reread they don't arrive until the very end, where he reveals that he knew he was Water Tribe the whole time. In episode 5, it would cover the events of the Painted Lady. Not many differences, except for that the reason why Sokka is obsessed over his schedule now is because he spent a lot of time sword training last episode, which the gang points out as his hypocrisy for. And since it can't take that long for the Fire Nation since it can't take that long to get to the Fire Nation Palace on Appa, Sokka is concerned about mapping the Fire Nation and figuring out a route for the invasion to arrive. There is added dialogue with the soldiers telling the poor river folk that they live in the greatest country on earth, and they should be overjoyed to support the military, but with the citizens telling him that they can piss off and they have destroyed their way of life. Also, there should be more scenes of the townspeople questioning Katara and interacting with her, with it being shown that they have built up a real understanding between each other. And also, the real Painted Lady shouldn't be shown at the end talking to Katara, since it kind of ruins the speech she gave about it not mattering if the Painted Lady is real or not. In episode 6, we get back to the beach, where it focuses on the stuff with the villains and the subplot in the original, with Aang and gang getting attacked by the Combustion Man, will be moved to next episode. It actually starts off with a flashback of Zuko when he was little, with Ursa and Ozai on the beach, and a story told by Ozai in the comics takes place with Zuko going out to save a turtle from a sea hawk, but then feeling bad for the hawk who looks hungry and getting washed away by the waves. Ursa tells Ozai to save him, but Ozai looks at him like he's about to let him drown, as he was previously talking about how weak his son is and how his firebending hasn't even appeared yet, while Zuko's has, who is only 2 years old. While Azula's has, who is only 2 years old. He does eventually go to rescue Zuko and slaps him for disobedience, and when Ursa tries to intervene, Ozai grabs her arm and she has a look of terror on her face. This serves to better characterize Ozai as the series proper, with some greater insights we gain from the comic. Anyway, then it cuts back to the present with the villain squad going to Ember Island. I would add some things like foreshadowing what will happen later. Zuko wakes up, as foreshadowing for what will happen later. Zuko wakes up half asleep in the middle of the night and sees an island across the ocean that isn't there by the morning. Also, the episode focuses more on Zuko and Mei's relationship, with it being clear how they are not the people they used to know each other as Zuko used to be much less angry before his banishment, and Mei used to be more emotional and open up too. In the end, they decide they want to get to know each other around the campfire, and as the people they have become, rather than the people who they used to be. When Azula goes to find Zuko alone at the house, she should have had a line saying, "Sometimes the good old days are just the result of a bad memory," implying that she has had it pretty rough at the hands of Ozai, just like Zuko. Ty Lee should get some added dialogue telling Zuko that she has been his friend for years before he was banished. Also, as I said in Season 2, Ty Lee's inferiority complex is that she was an awkward, ugly duckling when she was younger, who didn't fit in, and had 6 beautiful sisters. So she is now relishing in the fact that lots of boys like her. Finally, at the end of the episode, she should have everyone make a pact that no matter what, they will all stay together and be friends forever. And everyone agrees. Oh, Ty Lee. In episode 7, there is yet again more added content. This episode has Combustion Man searching for Team Avatar, but it's actually shown how he tracked them down, first going to the Earth Kingdom and paying June Iroh's weight in gold to locate Aang, and she finds out he is back in the Fire Nation, but there's no way she's going there, so Combustion Man goes back. He also kills those 2 Fire Nation soldiers who see Aang, as well as anyone who they told about the Avatar. The bulk of the episode, however, would actually be focused on something I am incredibly salty that we never got to see in the original, which is the gathering of forces for the invasion. The main plot would have the Earth King as the focus, as he tries to become the leader he should have been and rouse the support of the people for the invasion, who have given up hope because the Fire Nation took Ba Sing Se. This would give a great opportunity to see a lot of other characters in action that we haven't seen in a while, like the Mechanist, hard at work on his contraptions, the Freedom Fighters doing their freedom fighting, other older Kyoshi warriors being introduced, and wondering what happened to Suki and her group, and Tyro and Haru, who would be given more focus on their and Tyro and his son Haru, who would be given more major focus on their efforts to beat back the Fire Nation. A rumor would also be spreading around that the Avatar might have survived, with the Earth King telling some people that he is alive in order to get them to join the invasion force. In episode 8, it does not follow the events of the Avatar and the Fire Lord, as the placement of that episode in the original honestly just made no sense, and I will be moving it to later. Instead, this will just be the runaway episode, and it doesn't start with a flash forward, because that was just utterly pointless. And for the most part, the episode would play out as it did originally. I would add some stuff like Katara questioning if Toph even cares that much about defeating the Fire Lord, or if she is just acting selfishly, and she calls her out for lying to them about her parents allowing her to go with them. And also Toph should make clear that she hates her parents because they sent bounty hunters to try to kidnap her. Also, in the original episode, Combustion Man was incredibly nerfed, with his explosions doing way less damage than before. Since the entire town has been evacuated anyway, he should have free reign to pretty much destroy everything in his path until Toph knocks him in the forehead. Also, since Katara can't write in Earth Kingdom language, Katara should enlist the help of Aang to write a letter to Toph's parents. In episode 9, things would play out like how they did in the Puppet Master, but even more dark. First edition is that Toph should have been able to see Hama coming from the forest with her seismic sense, so that Team Avatar isn't shocked by her necessarily, and they're instead in dreadful anticipation of who is going to come out of the forest. Hama isn't the name she gives to Team Avatar originally, and taking Master Piandao's advice, she goes under a Fire Nation name, and after Katara realizes her name is Hama, she recognizes her as her own grandmother, as the one her grandmother used to talk about, and tells her how Kama is still alive, forming even more of a connection between the two. Also, in Hama's flashbacks, it shows the Southern Raiders attacking, and not normie Fire Nation troops, and they only attacked in raids during the winter, in the day when there was almost no moon in the sky, retreating each time, but always capturing several waterbenders, as the waterbenders kept taking over, and as the waterbenders kept getting taken over a decade of raids, the women healers were conscripted to fight, and Hama became one of the most powerful and experienced warriors in the tribe by necessity. When Toph makes it to the people Hama captured, they are extremely thirsty and malnourished, practically dead and begging for food, rather than the relatively healthy-looking people we see in the original episode. And Hama's description of what happened to her is also more graphic. She explains how the waterbender captives were promised that they would not be mistreated, but the prisons they were brought to were practically death camps, with no one ever being allowed to leave their cells, and practically every month someone died of dehydration, malnourishment, or disease, and she was the last one remaining after everyone else died. We see an actual puppet fight between her and the guards, unlike in the original, and she says that she did not have blue eyes, unlike most people from the Water Tribes, so she was able to blend right in the Fire Nation. There should also be added dialogue between Katara and Hama, where Katara says that what she is doing is wrong because she is torturing innocent civilians who had nothing to do with the war, to which Hama responds, "Did I have anything to do with the war? No. I was an innocent going about my life, until people from a faraway land decided to come and take me away from my home. I was a civilian, and yet me and my brothers were thrown into prison to be tortured to death all the same." Also, to make bloodbending seem more terrible, to really give Katara a reason not to want to use it, Katara and Sokka and Aang should all remark on how incredibly painful it is, with it feeling like their whole body is on fire. In episode 10, I'm actually going to be combining the Zuko subplot from Nightmares and Daydreams and the Iroh subplot from Sokka's Master into one, adding quite a few things. It starts out with a flashback of Iroh and his son Lu-Ten looking at their victory in breaking down the wall, and proclaiming that the Fire Nation will be victorious, only to then cut to Iroh mourning his son's death. He died at the same tree that he visited in the Tales of Ba Sing Se, by the way. Then it cuts to Iroh disheveled in his prison cell, and the Iroh training plot occurs like it does in the original, although with an added line from the guard who kept insulting Iroh, saying that he used to view him as a personal hero, but he betrayed everything that the Fire Nation stood for, and it keeps cutting back to flashbacks of Iroh roaming about the Earth Kingdom trying to find himself after his son's death, and coming to the understanding that Zuko did about the other nations while in disguise. On the Zuko end of things, it would play out much like how things did originally, with more scenes of Zuko trying to connect with and help out the peasants while his guards are against it, showing more of his kindness, and it would also showcase more of Zuko trying to repair his relationship with Mai after the events of the beach, and thinking that living in the Fire Nation might not be so bad. I feel like this would be a much better place to put this plotline before rather than after the events of Avatar and the Fire Lords, since Zuko really shouldn't have been acting like everything was just normal after that. But then, of course, he realized he wasn't invited to the war meeting. However, he is then told that Azula, he is told that Azula said that she would tell him about it, meaning Azula was fucking with him again. But he is actually relieved since he expects this kind of thing from his sister, and it means his father wanted him there. Zuko walks past the Fire Nation Lord's tapestry, all the Fire Nation Lord's tapestry, getting into the war room, showing a good look at all of them back to Sozin, and a significant change is that here we actually get to see what happens in the war meeting, unlike in the original. Ozai's plan is more fleshed out, with him saying that trusting the earthbending Dai Li isn't a permanent solution, and that he's planning to burn down the entire Earth Kingdom, and that he isn't planning to burn down the entire Earth Kingdom, just the most rebellious sections. He will lead an airship fleet to burn down the Earth Kingdom lands where the rebels are hiding, while in Ba Sing Se, the elite forces there will torch the city walls and from the city walls and the hot air balloons, with the city troops still inside the city being sacrificed so as to not arouse the suspicion of the Dai Li. Actually showing this would give a good idea of the stakes involved in the invasion and would make the audience even more fearful as to what is to come, since the Fire Nation knows that the invasion is coming. Then a guard would visit Iroh's cell, showing him a lotus tile, saying that Pian Dao confirmed that the Avatar is still alive and here in the Fire Nation, and he gives him a pouch containing a royal artifact and says that he will deliver the message to the prince soon. Meanwhile, Zuko agonizes over what he should do, dreaming about the people he met in the Earth Kingdom being burnt alive, before waking up in a cold sweat to find the message, find the secret message about his great-grandfather's demise. Or I guess in my rewrite, it would be his great-great-great-great-great-great... Yeah, I think that's it. Grandfather's demise. In episode 11, it would finally get back to the events of the Avatar and the Fire Lord. Aang goes to Roku's island and Zuko asks Azula about Sozin. The episode plays out like how it did originally, with some added stuff. Roku is actually Sozin's younger brother, and thus a prince of the Fire Nation, and Sozin's father is shown as a very sickly man who looks like he's on borrowed time, and has not done a good job ruling the Fire Nation. Whereas Sozin takes over as a beacon of strength and prosperity. When Roku goes to challenge Sozin about the colonies, he does not immediately get mad and tell him it was a non-violent takeover, as he entered into an agreement with the leaders of the territory to move their development forward and that they are better off. But Roku hits back, saying that this won't stand with the Earth King, and it will only lead to terrible things if he thinks about the Earth Kingdom citizens as lesser people who need to be saved by the Fire Nation. Also, the episode would end with Zuko looking at a picture of his mother and then crying. It is in this episode, with the knowledge revealed to Zuko about his lineage, that he finally decides he needs to turn about the Fire Nation, a much more fitting placement for this episode than originally. In episode 12, it would depict Aang's plot of Nightmares and Daydreams. The 3 Fire Lord dreams Aang has in the original are clearly anime-inspired, but I can't really tell which anime, so I would just change it so that in each dream sequence, Aang Aang resembles the main character from each of the big three series, from each of the old big three series, Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach. For example, the first dream sequence would have him showing up with a ninja headband with an air symbol on it saying, "Believe it, Fire Lords." And I actually haven't watched Bleach or One Piece, so I don't know how Aang should portray Ichigo or Luffy all that well. But whatever. Also, Aang should not know what the Fire Lord looks like, so his hallucinations should keep to the original over-exaggerated design. Apart from that, the plot plays out pretty similarly to how it does originally, with though Sokka also mentions that he sent a hawk out to tell the invasion force how to get to where they are. Meanwhile, it would also show scenes of Iroh in his prison cell talking to the guard Ming that happened later originally, as he tells her to take Tamara off duty. The invasion force arrives to Team Avatar with more people this time, including more of the Earth King's forces and the Earth King himself, older Kyoshi warriors, Mellerby and Longshot, the tribesmen from the Great Divide, and some northern waterbenders. Overall, it's just a bigger, more bigger force than originally. The episode ends with Aang shaving his head and then revealing to everyone that he is in fact alive and ready to fight. In episode 13, it starts out with a speech that Aang gives to everyone about what defeating the Fire Lord means, and from there things play out pretty much like how they do in the original. Maybe a few more scenes of side characters getting more time to shine in battle, and the Earth King encouraging soldiers to press on, and since the Fire Nation has segmented armies, all the soldiers protecting the homeland should be female. Speaking of gender politics on the battlefield, though, Earth Kingdom regiments in the show should be shown having women among them as well, rather than the entirely male regiments we see in the original series. Also, it didn't make much sense as to why in the original series Sokka, Katara, and Hakoda got off Appa and split up to take down the battlements. In my reread, Appa actually gets hit by one of them and is injured, only surviving because of Sokka's armor, showing it did have purpose after all. So Katara tries to heal both Appa and her dad, and the episode would end with Aang proclaiming that he still has to try to find a way to defeat the Fire Lord, even though he knew they were coming this time, and with him asking the invasion force whether or not they want to keep fighting. In episode 14, it of course starts with Aang, Toph, and Sokka trying to find the secret bunker. Mai and Ty Lee should definitely have been fighting with Azula and the Dai Li, considering they were non-benders and would have been perfect bodyguards in the situation. It was kind of stupid how Zuko was planning on just leaving the Fire Lord alone during the escape. It was kind of stupid how Zuko was just planning on leaving the Fire Lord alone during the eclipse, especially since he was later pushing so hard for Aang to kill him. So instead, Zuko should have been prepared to simply kill him without his bending, and says that Iroh is true leader anyway, to which Ozai responds that even if he does kill him, Azula will just be crowned as per his instructions, and then he stops Zuko from killing him by talking about his mother. And when he redirects the lightning, Zuko was trying to kill the Fire Lord, but he manages to get out of the way in time. Also, Azula should taunt Sokka more about Suki rather than staying tight-lipped. I'm pissed how we never got to see Iroh make his escape in the original, and we should at least get to see a little of it. Also, Team Avatar gets on Appa with Smellerby this time, who leaves Longshot behind, and the Earth King who is there allows himself to be captured too, and they actually take off Appa's giant armor so he can go faster and so he can fly faster and further, especially since he's also injured by now. In episode 15, it would of course cover the events of the Western Air Temple, but there are more scenes with the side characters, Teo, the Duke, Haru, and Smellerby, and they aren't shafted this time. And there are more scenes of them exploring the temple, because I really want to see that giant pie show table. Also, there's a scene at the Fire Nation where Mai finds Zuko's letter, and a scene where Ozai confronts Azula about lying to him about Zuko killing the Avatar. And for the first time, we see Azula being in terror, as Ozai tells her he was almost killed because of Zuko, who he trusted because of her lie. When Zuko first shows up to join the gang, the B team, Smellerby, the Duke, Haru, and Teo are there, and they also react to his proposition. And they tell him of how they have been hurt by the Fire Nation. Smellerby especially should be really untrusting of Zuko, since she saw him disguised as Lee, and says that Jet was completely right about him from the start. In my rewrite, Combustion Man is less of an idiot, and having learned from his experiences fighting Toph for the first time, he doesn't try to use his ability after getting hit in the head. Instead, Zuko shows up and pushes him off the ledge, after which he tries to blow up Zuko with nothing more to lose and blows up in midair, meaning that it is Zuko who in the end defeats him, which is more satisfying and cathartic than him just being taken out of the fight so quickly. Also, it should show Zuko trying to use his fire, but it being incredibly weak since he doesn't have enough anger. And earlier, before Zuko attacks Toph, it would be with the pre-made campfire. In episode 16, it would start out with Zuko being allowed into Team Avatar's ranks. And with the B team, Haru, the Duke, Smellerbee, and Teo would get more interactions with him. Of course, being very untrusting, and Zuko would get a scene reacting to hearing about Jet's death. Then Zuko would try to teach Aang firebending, and he later remarks on how this isn't the first time his firebending has been weakened, as when he faced Azula at the palace, he had incredibly weak fire blasts, after which Katara sneeringly responds that his fire blasts were plenty powerful when he was fighting them. And this is when a plot point from the finale is actually introduced, and this is when a plot point from the finale is actually introduced here. It was ridiculous how during the whole time Zuko was with them, he never told anyone about his father's plan to burn down the Earth Kingdom. In my rewrite, Aang tells Zuko that even if he can't firebend very well, they still have time, because he talked with everyone and they decided since Ba Sing Se already fell, they had no reason to attack before Sozin's comet. And of course, Zuko then reveals his dad's plan, saying, if you don't defeat the Fire Lord by the time the comet comes, there won't be a world to save anymore. Of course, everyone starts freaking out, and there was so much more urgency from Aang wanting to learn how to firebend. Seeing as how I have added more Fire Lords in between Sozin and Zulan, Zuko would not mention that Sozin started the tradition of hunting dragons, which honestly made no sense because he was riding atop a dragon, so why would he start hunting them? He instead says that dragons were once a symbol of Fire Nation nobility, and it was a tradition to ride them into battle. However, Fire Lord Zeno's dragon would not heed his commands because it was cruel to it. And so he killed it and proclaimed that his dragons were unworthy beasts, and any firebenders who killed a dragon would be given great honor and status. The episode would end with the Sun Warriors telling Zuko and Aang that they must meet the Masters Ran and Chao if they deem them unworthy, they will be destroyed on the spot. As you could have guessed, I'm sandwiching in another episode around this point to make room for more stuff. In episode 17, things play out pretty much exactly like the same as the dragon stuff did originally. After that, we get more scenes of Aang and Zuko training, and there are more scenes of Zuko trying to become accustomed to the group. Aang has come to accept him now, but people like Sokka, Haru, and Smellerbee are much tougher nuts to crack, and it shows him trying to make amends. Also, while I don't think it's necessary to devote an entire life-changing field trip with Zuko and Toph, I would like it if they did have more interactions. So they go out hunting together and try to connect over their similar yet different backgrounds, with both of them being nobility, but Zuko's father wanted him to be strong, and Toph's father wanting her to be weak. Zuko thanks Toph for being so accepting of him and promises to make up for injuring her feet, and Toph basically rags on him throughout the episode in her own way, saying how he is the opposite of his sister, as she can tell exactly what he is feeling, while Azula was nearly impossible to read. Toph also tells him that in some way the Fire Nation has hurt everyone else there, and she is the only one who hasn't been negatively affected by the Fire Nation's actions, which is why she carries less hatred, but she also admires Zuko for willing to give up everything to do the right thing, while she only left her parents behind just because she wanted to go on an adventure. Then, when Zuko gets back, he comes to somewhat of an understanding with everyone, except Katara, and later when he is serving everyone tea, Haru comments on how surreal it is that the Fire Lord is serving him tea. Then Sokka asks him about the boiling rock, and the episode ends with Zuko and Sokka landing on the boiling rock. In episode 18, it starts out actually showing how Zuko and Sokka got the Fire Nation uniforms, and things play out pretty similar to the original episode. I would have Zuko clarify that the prison by the Fire Nation is meant for political prisoners, so the Earth King is probably stationed there, while the Boiling Rock is for mostly dangerous Fire Nation criminals like murderers, though it does hold some prominent non-bender war criminals and pirates. Suki should have a badass scar from fighting Azula. Also, the warden telling Zuko that the prisoners would tear him to shreds if they found out he was a traitor didn't make much sense because they were all imprisoned by the Fire Nation, so wouldn't all imprisoned by the Fire Nation, so instead he would tell him that the prisoners want to kill him because he's part of the royal family, and the Fire Lord of Zulon was responsible for massively cutting down on crime and is responsible for putting most of the people here in jail. He didn't want to get caught up in a war he didn't care about, and he knew that if he joined the army, there was no getting out of it, or he would have been killed. Zuko is shocked that draft dodgers would be thrown into the prison with hardened convicts, and Chit Zhang explains that any firebender who doesn't support the war effort is incredibly dangerous to the Fire Nation, and they can't be allowed to continue living out their lives. Originally, overall, just more focused on Chit Zhang's character, because I feel like he's pretty underrated. And Sokka would be reunited with his father, and the episode would end with Chit Zhang being confronted by the warden, who says that he hasn't tortured his friend and girlfriend yet, but he's going to start if he doesn't talk. In episode 19, it starts with Sokka talking to his dad about how to escape. Also, Azula doesn't just say, "I'm a people person," when figuring out that it was the guard wasn't the traitor, and simply used deductive reasoning, saying that it had to be a fresh guard who snuck in, and if Zuko was there, then his new buddies can't be far behind. Also, to start a riot, Chit Sang doesn't just say, "Let's riot." Instead, he picks up the guy and says, "Hey everyone, this guy said Fire Lord Azula did nothing wrong." Alright, then, during the fight on the gondola, Suki and Hakoda should actually work together to fight Ty Lee, and actually manage to get a good hit on her for once. And May's dagger should probably actually hit the guards rather than just their clothing. She also says that she is trying to stop them from cutting the line to save Zuko and her uncle. Also, when Azula confronts May near the end, Ty Lee should mention the promise they made on Ember Island, and that with Zuko gone, they have to stick together. And just to spite them, Azula commands that May and Ty Lee be put in separate prisons. The episode would end with Katara and Sokka tragically being separated from their father right after being reunited with Azula showing up, and Hakoda saying that while they escape on Appa, he has to take care of the kids like Haru and Teo. And while Sokka asks Suki to leave, she demands to stay with them, and they all plan up to meet together in a certain location. In episode 20, I'm going to be doing something similar to my rewrite of the Jet episode, showing the perspective of Yan Ra first, a Fire Nation old man going about his day with two shadowy figures following him. And of course, later turning out to be Zuko and Katara. It of course transitions to Zuko's battle with Azula, and it was pretty dumb how in the original he was saved by sheer luck falling on that airship. Falling on the airship, since he's not supposed to be lucky, so he simply doesn't fall in my rear and continues his battle with Azula. Team Avatar searches for Team Hakoda, but they aren't able to get a Team Avatar searches for Team Hakoda, but they aren't able to find them and get away feeling pretty down. When Katara's yelling at Zuko, Zuko tries to argue with her, saying how he got her father back to her. Also, while on Appa, Zuko should question Katara on whether he actually knows her mother is dead or not, as there was no body. And she says that there were burnt marks from something being dragged out of the hut, so she was probably burnt alive and had her body stolen. When Yan Ra remembers what happens in Katara's home, he tells her mother that all the Water Tribe prisoners were shut down, and Fire Lord Ozai was recently crowned and implemented a new policy of extermination of the Waterbenders, meaning that both Zuko and Katara's mother were taken away from them at about the same time, and Katara remarks angrily to Yan Ra about how he was trying to destroy their culture and didn't even leave her mother's body for proper burial rites. Also, Katara tells the guy that he was on a power trip during his time as a soldier. The episode, of course, ends with Zuko questioning Aang about what he's going to do if he faces his father. In episode 12, it's the Ember Island players. Now, this episode might not work as well in my rewrite because I ended up fixing some of the things that the original made fun of, like Jet's death. But a lot of the humor could still work with like Zuko's constantly being dunked on. In fact, I would actually exaggerate the screenplay characterizations even more, with Zuko shown constantly taking L after L after L after L after L after L after L, while Toph basically wins every single fight single-handedly, and Aang is shown constantly being unable to take anything seriously. Also, it was really weird how the play changed Zhao capturing Aang to Zuko capturing Aang for no real reason, and it would just be Zhao in my rewrite with a ridiculously exaggerated sideburns. There are also some minor things I would add, like the scene in the play where the Avatar fish destroys the Fire Nation. I would have the actor yelling, "Die, kill, destroy, murder," and Aang is clearly really uncomfortable. I really wish that the play didn't just skip through parts of recapping Season 3 so it could actually be shown in my rewrite. Also, to fuck with the Zutara shippers even more, the Zuko and Katara actors would actually kiss. Speaking of which, it was so freaking weird how Aang ended up in a really rough spot in their relationship in this episode, but then they were smooching later in the finale together. In my rewrite, Aang would actually deal with his relationship troubles and inferiority complex, and Katara and him would confirm their love for one another. In episode 22, we would of course be finally getting to the home stretch, and thank goodness, because I am so tired. And I would add some stuff. But firstly, I moved Aang's plan to wait out the comet and Zuko telling everyone what happened at the war meeting to earlier, so the context of Aang and everyone having a beach party is quite different, with them knowing what is going to happen in 4 days. I think it could still work, as Aang is trying to take a lesson from nightmares and daydreams and not overstressing about it, and with things looking pretty dire, everyone is trying to enjoy themselves, since it might be some of the last moments together. But of course, Zuko was having none of that shit and attacks Aang, telling everyone that they can't be thinking about how it might be their last moments together, and they need to be only focused on victory. However, Aang questions Zuko if he really thinks he can defeat the Fire Lord, since we didn't get any concrete feats on Ozai in the original, in my rewrite, Zuko would be hyping his father up massively and saying that he was one of the greatest firebending masters of all time, and defeated Combustion Man and Agni Kai, severing his limbs, who had previously been undefeated in every Agni Kai he fought in. The gang seems pretty hopeless, and they have no idea how they're going to stop the Fire Lord, saying that they have no army and no plan. And Aang says the only chance they have is for him to enter the Avatar state. And regrettably, General Fong was actually right. So he has been trying to center himself to get into it again. But this time, Zuko is the one giving the pep talk and tells everyone that they don't need to bet everything on unreliable power, and that if they all work together, they can take down the Fire Lord. Sokka is the first to agree with him, saying that they once stormed the Royal Earth Kingdom Palace single-handedly, and that was before they had the Fire Prince and a leader of the Kyoshi warriors with them. We then see Zuko laying out a more comprehensive plan about what to do, and using his intel of the Fire Nation to strategize with Sokka. Meanwhile, we get an added scene of Ozai and Azula. The Daily never really got a proper resolution in the original series, so in my rewrite, Azula and Ozai would summon all the agents to a room together and burn them all alive, so that there was no one in the capital who can go against them. However, Ozai is still clearly holding Azula on thin ice for lying to him. Meanwhile, Annie plants the idea in her head that there might be traitors among the Fire Nation, of course, which leads down her descent into madness. Meanwhile, back with Team Avatar, we would get more extensive training and preparation than just one scene, and Suki gets a badass warrior outfit, like Sokka, rather than just wearing a crop top for the final battle, and Zuko tells Aang that he had a chance to kill the Fire Lord by redirecting his lightning, but missed because he hesitated, and Aang can't do that. We get more of a sense of Ozai manipulating Azula, as when he tries to depart on the airship fleet alone, he tells Azula that she is the only one he really trusts, and he knows that she won't betray him like Zuko did. The episode would end with Aang going after the Lion Turtle. In episode 23, it would of course start with Team Avatar trying to contact Aang after he departed. I always found it weirder in the original series June helped Zuko and Aang after he said that their world was going to end. I mean, she doesn't seem like the type of gal who would be interested in the world at large. In my rewrite, she asks him if where they're at right now is going to be burned down, and Zuko says yes, and she thanks him for the warning and is heading out. But then Zuko tells her that his uncle is going to become Fire Lord, and when he does, he will make her one of the richest people in the world and employ her in his services. So then she does decide to help them. When Team Avatar meets the White Lotus, the leader of the Sun Warriors should be among them, because as King Bumi said, all old people know each other. and he is coming out of hiding to keep another civilization from nearly going extinct. That's also, since it's ridiculous how Sokka's dad was just completely written out of the finale until the end, he actually reappears. After Zuko and Aang came from the Sun Warriors, their leader informed them of the White Lotus and that they were going to find Aang and crew, but they just missed them and ended up picking up Hakoda and Chit Sang, who became low-level White Lotus members, as well as the non-old people Smellerbee, Teo, the Duke, and Haru, who all participate in the final battle in some way, and they have their character interactions with being both, and they all have their character interactions after being reunited. It would be great if Sokka and Zuko actually interacted around Piandao, with him being both their swords masters, with Sokka joking about how maybe they could have a sword contest in the future, but Piandao says that Zuko would actually absolutely crush him. Also, Paku and Gran Ran don't get engaged because that was just weird, and it made no sense that a solar eclipse was happening on the other side of the world, so Bumi experienced a separate solar eclipse during his escape right after Aang left, and asked the crew if they ever saw one. On the Lion Turtle Island, since Kyoshi just straight up killed Chin in my rewrite, Aang would ask her if she ever felt bad about doing so, and she responds by saying that she never regretted it in the slightest, and any threat to peace must be eliminated without question, because she's hard like that. When Kurik talks to Aang, he doesn't talk about the stuff with Ko the face stealer, since that already would have been revealed in the Lost in the Spirit World episode, and instead he simply talks about being proactive rather than reactive. When Aang talks to Yang Chen, she tells him that he is the Avatar first and an Air Nomad second, and that was a hard lesson she had to learn when she had to do things that went against the strict Airbender code. Zuko would be reunited with his uncle, and the episode would end with Aang saying that he has to kill the Fire Lord. In episode 24, it would start out with Aang realizing that the island is moving. Since Piandao's skills wouldn't be the best for liberating Ba Sing Se, instead he goes with Sokka, Suki, Toph, Chit Sang, who he now says has to take a more active stand against the Fire Nation rather than just draft dodging. Hakoda, Smellerbee, who told Zuko that she expects him to hold up his end of the bargain, free the Earth Kingdom. The Duke, Teo, and Haru, all on eel hounds together to infiltrate the airship fleet. Aang's dialogue with the Lion Turtle is a lot less incomprehensible than originally. He has more lines to explain some things to Aang about how giving up a part of ourselves to obtain power and dominance is the greatest and most dangerous lie in history. And only if you stay true to yourself can true power be unleashed using your chi. He tells Aang that where there is a will, there is a way, and he can find a way to defeat the Fire Lord if he really he can find a way to defeat the Fire Lord his way if he really tries, but his spirit must be unbendable or he will be corrupted and destroyed. Then things play out like how they did originally, with Zuko and Katara going off to fight Azula, while the White Lotus goes to fight the troops ready to burn Ba Sing Se, and Hakoda, Chit Sang, Haru, and Piandao distract the Fire Nation troops on the ground, while Sokka, Toph, Suki, Teo, and the Duke and Smellerbee go up in the airship, with Teo being able to figure out how it works by studying the one Sokka and Zuko brought back from the Boiling Rock. The episode ends with Sokka saying, "It's Aang, he's back." Speaking of which, Sozin's comet should be making the Firebenders' fire much hotter, so the elites should have blue fire like Azula, and Azula would have white fire. It would make for a cool contrast, as since Aang isn't a master, his fire would be red, but upon entering the Avatar state, it would actually be blue. In episode 25, it's pretty much just all action. It's really just a shame how the battle for Ba Sing Se was barely focused on the original, and in my rewrite there would be a bunch more scenes added of the old masters kicking ass, and them being very focused on keeping the fires away from Ba Sing Se. It would also show more of Team Sokka taking down the airship fleet, with Suki managing to get control of one of the airships, and Pipsqueak and Smellerbee, who end up falling off the airships, would be caught by Teo with his glider contraption. Also, Ozai's dialogue about how the world revolved around him wasn't really the best in the original. Instead, he would remark around how the world revolves around the Fire Nation, and everyone who gets in the way of the Fire Nation's legacy must perish, going full racist and worshipping his founding fathers of his nation. The episode would end with Aang transforming into the Avatar state and coalescing all the elements around him. In episode 26, it's finally the grand finale, and it just really bothered me how when Azula was about to hit Katara with lightning, she wasn't generating any lightning, which was also the case on the Boiling Rock. In both instances, she would be generating lightning, and Katara actually easily defeats Azula. By using her own lightning against her, freezing herself for protection, and splashing Azula with water so she electrocutes herself. Poetic justice. Rather than, just chaining her, which she can do afterwards, and Azula surviving the shock, basically, since it went out in all directions as well. During Aang's battle with Ozai, there was a scene of Team Sokka being rescued by Hakoda, and they all try to get away from the Firebenders, and they see Aang and Ozai battling, remarking on how they are on a completely different level than them. Also, when Aang goes to Energy Bend Ozai, he should use all the 4 elements to show how much he has learned, avoiding his attacks by going on the ground, Boomy style, jumping out of the way with airbending, restraining him with water bending, and using firebending to repel his fire breath. In the epilogue, everyone ends up surviving, of course, and the Earth King is let out of his imprisonment and is present for Zuko's coronation and gives a speech alongside Zuko and Aang about the end of the war. The 3 young leaders who were cured of their ignorance coming together to change the world in a positive way. Zuko, who is crowned by the Fire Sage Shayu, says that the war is finally over and all war prisoners will be able to return home to see their families, and the Fire Nation will be pulling out from the Earth Kingdom territories, with many Fire Nation people in the crowd incredibly unenthusiastic about. There are also just more minor character interactions between everyone, allowing everyone who survived to get a last word in, like Smellerbee reuniting with Longshot, Haru reuniting with his dad, and Teo reuniting with his dad, and Mei saying that she hates that Zuko left her, and she might have just come with him if he had just told her about what was going on. But she says that in the end, she is proud of him for what he did. Aang and Katara actually talk to each other before smooching, and in my final alteration of all, Zuko going to see Ozai would be an end credits scene to hype up the Search movie that may or may not be coming out anytime in the future. We shall see. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that was pretty much all the alterations, additions, and rewrites I would make to the Avatar The Last Airbender series. I did include a few major ones, but as I said before, most of them were just really nitpicks, because Avatar The Last Airbender is really just that good of a series. And while it has its flaws and missed opportunities, most of them are pretty minor. I only ended up adding 8 episodes worth of content to this series in my rewrite, and I will definitely be making more changes in my Legend of Korra rewrite, which will be coming in the form of 4 parts, where I take a look at how each season could have been written better. I just wanted to get my rewrites for the original series off my chest, because though I absolutely love it to death, no piece of media is perfect, and I wanted to take a look at how, given some hindsight of the nitpicks I had about it, and how, given some hindsight, some of the nitpicks I had about it could have been rectified. But in the end, it was just a lot of nitpicks. But anyway, this has been my rewrite of Avatar The Last Airbender. Please feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe. This has been the Aromantic Shipper, and I will see you next time. And as always, remember, just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people... Just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye.